This is dailyfantasylobby.com. Hey everyone, welcome to the dailyfantasylobby.com podcast. I'm Christy.
I'm David.
And today we're going to be talking about the latest development in the DFS industry. The big headline news is that PokerStars have announced that they're going to be entering the DFS space. Whenabouts, David?
Yeah, that's right. I think it was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of instant reaction, and people were quite quick to say quite a few things, and positive and negative. I think we sort of sat back for a little bit and thought about it. And we've come to a couple of conclusions that we thought actually would be quite good to share in podcast form. And really, we're definitely not saying we're right. We're definitely not saying we're wrong.
We want to spark a bit of debate.
Yeah, I think that's what we want. I think we'd like to have a nice forum about it, so we're welcome to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the first thing that should be mentioned, of course, is that PokerStars, two different companies. It's actually Amaya is the parent company, okay, and last year they took over PokerStars and its sister company Full Tilt. So, generally if you're a recreational poker player, you'll be familiar with these two names: Full Tilt Poker,
yeah,
PokerStars.
That's right. And obviously, Amaya, a Canadian listed business, hadn't actually operated sort of business to consumer titles before on websites. So they were actually really just buying the PokerStars business. All the PokerStars management came with it, and everything just continued as normal. Amaya, what they did, they went and found enough funding to actually make the acquisition, and they're managing the overall sort of cash situation now. So,
which immediately begs the question: are Amaya spreading themselves too thin? I mean, we don't know the absolute ins and outs of their finances. We just know what's been made publicly available.
I suppose it's hard to know what an individual can handle in terms of pressure,
sure,
and what sort of their ability levels are. But you would say that the PokerStars acquisition was the largest acquisition that was seen in the regulated online gaming space. And now to come into daily fantasy, you would say, and we'll go on to talk about this a little bit more, but they're definitely not coming in to be the number 5 operator or the number 6 operator. They want to be the number 1 operator or the number 2. They want to be of that size. They're looking at billions to add into their bottom line. They're not looking at can we add on £4 million or dollars. That's not really.
There's no benefit to them in sort of coming in just to sit there. We noticed, you may be familiar with this, Adam at Ilo's Research came up with a figure of 95%, is that right? 95% market share?
This 95% number was the market number, roughly, that they're looking at FanDuel and DraftKings. I think it's sort of become almost like an acknowledged number in the industry. So we're saying, are Stars looking just to have the other 5%?
I mean, when you've got two companies dominating 95%, and then you've got dozens of other companies scrabbling, Stars aren't interested in bottom feeding, are they? They want to go straight in.
They're going big here. So it's fascinating. It's hugely disruptive, I think, to the industry.
Yeah.
We know what we're looking at here. We see the sizes of tournaments that you're looking, the $1 million, the Million Maker, and everything else. I think what we could be looking at is a significant increase to that.
And the knock-on effect. I find this particularly fascinating because, again, this is speculation, this is discussion. I'm not stating this as fact by any means. But what I find fascinating is that FanDuel and DraftKings have had such headline-worthy funding rounds, enormous rounds of funding that have gone their way. They can't afford to then have a down round. They can't afford, the credibility will just plummet. And then, will the PokerStars news affect FanDuel and DraftKings fundraising attempts?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I mean, there's been so much news, hasn't there? That Disney, ESPN via Disney, the parent company, have taken a stake in DraftKings. It's still not been officially announced, but I mean, I assume it's happening because there's a lot of noise about it. Sort of $500 million worth of spend commit that DraftKings have got to commit back to ESPN in return for ESPN giving them $250.
$500 million, and we're shooting this in front of a parking thistle strip,
which is priceless. So that deal was a bit like, actually, we'll give you $250 million to take a 20% stake in our company. The DraftKings deal, but I know it locks out and was actually probably really more of a media deal than anything. FanDuel have been rumoured to be doing a deal with some large private equity business, so we're talking about that might be getting announced in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Might even be announced by the time the podcast.
You never know.
What we don't know, but
But then this is what you're saying about it being disruptive. Could this completely change the landscape?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm about to sign a $500 million check over to FanDuel, let's say, and then David Bazoff, the CEO of Amaya PokerStars, announces he's coming into daily fantasy, and oh, by the way, he's got a 91 million user database. Oh, and by the way, they built the most scalable transactional website that's been seen in online gaming ever. It has to scare you.
Of course.
Because I think you can probably buy some Amaya stock at a cheaper price potentially that you can buy the FanDuel stock with revenue.
Yep.
I don't know, we're getting into territory that is all guesswork and speculation, but that's the purpose of this podcast.
Well, what really fascinates me is that David Bazoff has clearly identified the crossover between poker and DFS, just in terms of demographic. The average DFS player, very, very similar model to the average poker player.
Yeah, and I'm laughing because it's funny because people will say, DraftKings associated themselves with the World Series of Poker, right? Became the headline sponsor. So DraftKings have obviously acknowledged this. More than last week. They acknowledged that a while back. FanDuel refused to acknowledge it. There's been a statement coming out from sort of FanDuel HQ in the last couple of weeks saying that they really don't see a correlation between poker and DFS. Well, you might believe
they said that with a straight face.
They might believe it. Nobody else does. And I think it just, I don't know, someone's came up with that statement at HQ, and the corporate communications person's forced to spread it out, and I think everyone's just laughing.
And of course, the most tenuous anecdotal evidence you could ever have, I'm a professional poker player. And I'm talking DFS.
Exactly.
But what is so fascinating is we know that legally, so if you're not familiar with this, legally poker and sports betting, casino gambling, etc. are classified as games of chance. DFS is classified as a game of skill. Yet, obviously, there's an incredibly, in the Venn diagram, poker and DFS are crossing over big style. So legally, I know that there are going to be some issues here because poker, grey area at best. DFS, fully legal and regulated in the States.
Sure.
Yet how can you have PokerStars coming in and making waves?
I know. I think it's a significant challenge there in terms of PR and promotion. But you actually had a really good point about this. Maybe it's not going to be the brand PokerStars. Maybe it'll be.
I think it could be Full Tilt. I think that they might try and resurrect the Full Tilt brand, which has really been floundering after Black Friday a few years ago.
In fact, it was the 4-year anniversary.
4-year anniversary. Yes. I know. I shed a little tear. It's painful. It cost me a lot of money, but I'm not bitter. Okay. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this then becomes the flagship Full Tilt product.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, because there definitely is a lot of tilt in playing DFS. that isn't acknowledged.
And you do it at Full Tilt.
And you can do it at Full Tilt.
So yeah, I really wouldn't be that surprised. But then you have to ask, if they're going in at, aiming not for this 5% market share, if they're going in to be fully disruptive, the credibility of the PokerStars name, believe me, I can't speak on behalf of all poker players in the world, but I can say with pretty good confidence that online poker is largely PokerStars.
Right. And is it like a Rolls Royce brand?
Yeah, it definitely is. Where almost every other major online poker company has had massive PR fails, including Full Tilt, quite famously. Right. PokerStars has just been, flawless, pretty much flawless, even post takeover.
Okay, right. That's a ringing endorsement because you could be, a slightly cynical person on occasion regarding things. You're not going to just say that for the sake of saying that. So we're looking at a really strong brand, we're looking at great customer service, we're looking at the technology to deliver, we're looking at an existing user base.
We're looking at the executives, we're looking at the staff base that they have there. These are
over
the
2,000
best guys.
Staff, don't they?
Yeah.
Over 2,000 staff. You look at FanDuel and DraftKings, they're struggling to recruit enough engineers to keep the site going. So
we hear.
It's not necessarily that level of playing field. What they do have, FanDuel and DraftKings, has got the head start.
Yep.
So it's going to be fascinating.
It sure is.
It'll be fascinating to see how that plays out. There has been a school of thought, and some people are saying, I don't know what you think about this, that maybe maybe PokerStars are coming in because they've got a large swathe of European regulated gaming licenses, and actually maybe what they're doing is they're going to come into DFS, but it's going to be in Europe, and maybe they're going to be the company, for example, that really makes soccer enormous, or whatever. So,
it's possible. It's possible. I'm not feeling it, to be honest. I'm just thinking back to Black Friday, okay? If you're not aware, Black Friday was what happened 4 years ago, where online poker in the States shut down overnight, long story short. So, what was the stat? 49% of the online poker market disappeared overnight. I mean, that is frightening. So if you can capture, even a fraction of those guys, America is just crazy for DFS. They'll want a piece of that. They'll want the big piece of that. Yeah, the full chunk.
Yeah. And I know that DraftKings did the deal with ESPN, and it's a bit of a lockout job, although other companies are allowed to advertise on the platform, but will they, what they choose to. There's a lot of other media platforms in the States, as we know, so
absolutely.
What would it cost you? 30, 40 million, is that chump change to PokerStars? I mean, would that even bother them? Call it 50. How do you end up at 50 million? Is that enough to get it going? 100 million? I mean, is that
where does it end? I simply don't know. There are more questions than answers right now. One other thing that I think that might be really, really important is that PokerStars are receptive to technology. They're receptive to increasing the knowledge base of the poker community, but presumably they will translate that to the DFS community. They run the Poker School online,
right?
Really popular educational site, and we know outright from our moles in the industry that they are receptive towards add-on software such as Poker Tracker, Hold'em Manager, things that the other sites really try to fight. PokerStars embraced.
And I think it worked really well for them. That the users, that's what the user wanted. The user wanted helpful tools. People created the helpful tools, and PokerStars allowed the helpful tools.
Yeah.
So
PR win
positive,
right
wasn't
there.
It?
Yeah.
It was positive, and then it became actually a very sticky product, didn't it? That you would go to PokerStars because you could use your HUD
exactly
and everything else, and then obviously down the line all the other operators realised that was happening, and they jumped back in, didn't they?
But the initial reticence towards change that most big companies feel, understandably so, PokerStars didn't have that. Maybe because they were privately owned, maybe because they didn't have the shareholders to placate, but maybe it's because they're forward thinking. They think, you know what, we respond to what the people tell us rather than we tell the people what they want. I don't know which is better. I really don't know which is better, but it's going to be a fun journey finding out.
It sure will be. And do you think that PokerStars, because I feel sorry for a little bit, the guys at FanDuel, they invented this product.
Yeah.
They really used their brains, are inventive, they were pivoting around, they found it, and I just can't give them enough credit for that. And then to have someone like DraftKings coming in and just copy the idea, and then to see the rest of the DFS operators copy the idea, and they've seen most of them off, but then to have PokerStars coming in, who again are copying their idea, and it's an accusation of bullying perhaps from PokerStars, or
the idea is out there.
All fair in love and war.
All fair is in love and war.
Right.
All is fair in love and war. Also, FanDuel have had, they've been the dominating name in the industry. They've had a great run at it.
They've had a run at it.
And they've done it very well. So you can't expect to have it.
And they might not, the guys, they might not need much more. They might not need another year or something, and they might end up with an IPO sort of position, or a sale or something. So I just, what I'm saying is, I like to see people who work hard and they're inventive, get the rewards.
So one final question: PokerStars, FanDuel's, DraftKings. Could you see potentially PokerStars absorbing either FanDuel or DraftKings?
I could. I really could.
They're really acquisitive.
I really could. I think it'd give them some lovely addition to their revenues, and I think they could play around with the numbers and make it work for them.
I mean, they're mortgaged, presumably mortgaged up to the eyeballs with the PokerStars deal. They bought them over.
Yeah. Was it 5 billion or something?
It was something. It was 4 point something. It was something obscene.
Okay. Quite significant, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Are they then simply capable of raising the money to take over, say, DraftKings or FanDuel?
I think they are. I really think they are. raising money is, I think the decision to do it is a decision. I don't think raising the money would be an issue.
I like it.
Yeah, how did guys who had really almost nothing manage to raise enough money to have everything? You know, I think that's what in fact, that's the story of daily fantasy as well, because you know, why are FanDuel and why are DraftKings the number 1 and 2 is because the amount of money that they've raised.
Yeah, they've blown everyone else out of the water. Right. And there are, let's not kid anyone on here, there are equally good sites out there, technology-wise, in terms of intuitive layout, software is good, brilliant. But these two dominate, and they continue to dominate.
They have the money. I really think at the minute it's just a fundraising business as much as anything else.
It largely is, isn't it? Okay, we're going to wrap it up here because we've talked long enough. What we do want is for you guys to get in touch. Hit us up on Twitter @SuperLobby. You can email us info@dailyfantasylobby.com. There are a million ways to get in touch with us.
Absolutely, million and one.
So please do. We'd love to chat with you. We'd love to hear from you. Potentially, we'd love it. You know, if you feel you've got a really strong stance on this, we'd love to have you on as a guest. In the meantime, however, we'll say goodbye. I'm Christy.
I'm David.
And thanks very much for listening and watching. Bye, folks.